Dramani Mahama of Ghana. And I want to put one question to you, family. And I want you to hold it in your mind for the next few minutes. And that question is that the man who sold himself to us as a Pan-African torchbearer, actually the one, right, walking us backward on Pan-Africanism. Because the whole statement, propaganda, mission statement of President John Dramani Mahama before he became the president of Ghana was that he was going to be the torchbearer of the Pan-Africanism, moving along the direction of the Kruk and Fuga Charter. But ladies and gentlemen, every deal, every signature of President Dramani Mahama tell us something that does not look like Pan-Africanism. He has done some things that are good, but he has done more to undermine the sovereignty of Ghana and Africa as a whole. Now, you see, a lot of us were genuinely excited when Dramani Mahama returned to power in January 2025. We thought finally, here is the African leader who will stand shoulder to shoulder with the AES bloc, who will respect the spirit of Kurugan Fuga, who will stop selling, the African sovereignty. And I have to tell you, family, what we have seen since is the opposite of everything we thought. Now, it seems as though that underneath all the beautiful speeches that President John Dramani Mahama has been singing away, the very thing our ancestors bled for, those invitation and all of that. Now, it didn't work. Before we go deep, let me remind us that the Kurugan Fuga Charter said some things about Pan-African sovereignty. And if you understand what the charter means, you will be able to recognize that everything that President John Dramani Mahama has allowed in Ghana does not move us towards the direction of Pan-Africanism or African sovereignty. Ladies and gentlemen, the charter proclaimed in the year 1236, after the Battle of Kreda, by the Great Assembly of the Malian Empire under Sundiata Keita, is one of first of the protection of life, the dignity of human person, the preservation of the homeland, and above all, the sovereignty of African people. Now, this is the spirit of true Pan-African, Pan-Africanism and African leader. Every African leader that called himself a Pan-Africanist is supposed to uphold this spirit. So when I look at the counterproductive step coming out of Ghana today, I do not see a man in President Dramani Mahama who is defending the charter. I see a man that is breaking the spirit one signature at a time. So the first information of today, I want this to really sit with you. On the 24th of March 2026, Ghana became the first African nation to sign a formal security defense partnership, the first African nation with the European Union. Now, think about that very carefully. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Somalia, Madagascar, they are not making this type of deal, right? They are breaking free from the European military embrace. Ghana was rushing straight into that very embrace that a lot of nations that are trying to be sovereign are getting out of. Now, the European Union hand over military equipment in return. Ghana opens the permanent security and defense dialogue with Brussels. So a Ghanaian representative has to go to Brussels every year to go and give account. That's what it means. Now, critics at home has already called it what it is. They called it President John Dramani Mahama selling of Ghana's sovereignty. That's what they called it, right? Not me. So what would have been the point of watching the Sahel fight for its independence if a supposed Pan-African leader was at the same moment pulling his own country deeper into the Western security architecture? What for? Given the fact that the European Union is not even a security alliance, it's an economic alliance. And this brings me to the second piece. On the 30th of October 2025, at the Paris Peace Forum, President Mahama met with Emmanuel Macron, all right, and formally requested French military assistance to combat piracy in Ghana's territorial waters. Now, I have nothing against the security architecture of Ghana coastline. No problem. Everywhere is the hotel. But the optics, ladies and gentlemen, are deafening. All right. You see, the same security architecture that a lot of people have been complaining about, that okay, this security architecture is counterproductive, it makes no sense and all of that. That is the security architecture that Ghana is accepting. You see, Dramani Mahama can make all the beautiful speech. He can, he can tell us that, he's a Pan-African leader, he's the best that we've ever seen. But you see, the devil is in the detail. You can say one thing, but Africans of today, the young Africans of today, we are not looking at what you are saying. We are looking at what you are doing. Because the power of a man is in the doings, not in what they say. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at all of this move, we have to be honest. You see, I have nothing against Ghana. All right. The problem is, Ghana signed an agreement with France. Okay. That Ghana will collaborate with France, the same country that have been rejected from the Sahel state, who is a neighbor to Ghana. A military assistance. They called, Ghana requested, not Paris, making a negotiation, that France should come and assist Ghana in combating piracy. I don't know what I don't know what that means in Ghana's territorial waters. Now, I have nothing against Ghana, like I said. No problem. Everywhere is Delta Hotel. The same France that was being pushed out of the Sahel for its counterproductive presence was being invited to Ghana's waters by a man who called himself a Pan-Africanist. Why are we running towards the very power structure the rest of the continent is running away from? That's the question that the president of Ghana needs to answer. Now, the third information, and this is the one that a lot of parents are angry about in Ghana. Under President Mahama's education ministry, Ghana has rolled out a revised basic curriculum that introduces Arabic and Chinese language. I want you to get this clearly. Arabic and Chinese language instruction into the classroom. Now, Ghana even, I would say this. Ghana even tried a little bit. Senegal called it the Omaye Faye of the West. He called it, he made it so clear. He said now they will study the Quran in Senegal. It has to be a core course that you will have to pass in Senegal. Not engineering, not things that will, improve the nation. You go and study the Quran. So now, you see, before you come for me in the comments, the ministry says that this language are optional, that they will not replace English. I hear you. It is not even about English here. But here is my question. Where is the equal energy for our own language? When we were growing up, we used to learn our language in school. As a Nigerian, we were taught to learn Igbo language. We were taught Igbo language. There were teachers that were teaching us different language of our own people. But now we have a conflict over learning France, learning Chinese, learning other people's language. Does that even make sense? What is the joy in that? Are they learning Ghana's language in their own country? Eh? You see, here is my question. Where is the equal energy for our own language? Where is the promotion of the Twi of Ewe? All right? The Ga of Dagbani. So the tongues of our own family, the ones they actually speak, the one they develop by themselves. You see, it seems as though we are so eager to teach our children, tongues that does not belong to us. Languages of Beijing, languages of the Arab world, Yet we cannot do the same for our own indigenous language. When we speak our own language, they call it vernacular. So that is not Pan-African development, ladies and gentlemen. What is going on in Mali is different. The Malians are speaking their own language. You see? So to me, it doesn't look anything like Pan-Africanism at all. Anybody can try to defend Mahama all they want. We don't care. We are just telling this statistic fact here. The cultural surrender. This is the cultural surrender of Ghana, dressed up as modernization, because that's what they call it. You are learning Chinese, you are learning this. It's a cultural surrender. It's nothing other than that. Now let's go to the fourth point, because for us to make this type of claim, we have to come with points. And this one goes to the heart of the base question. And I want to be honest with you. I have made my research. There is no giant US base with a fence and a flag sitting in Ghana. All right? But that is not the full story. Not even close. I will break it down to you because I've made my research. I don't just want to use whatever anybody put on the social media. What Ghana actually signed in 2018 and what the Mahama government has refused to review or revoke is a defense cooperation agreement with the United States. Now, I want you to listen to these details very well. That gives American military unimpeded access to agreed facilities. So there are some facilities. It's not a base. With the United States, that gives American military total access and areas on Ghana's soil. Under this agreement, US military and civilian personnel can enter and exit Ghana without a visa. All right? Using nothing but America's identification. Are you aware that Ghana is part of the country that US has even increased the visa bond on? They've increased it. What is Pan-African about this leadership? I don't see it. All right? So, American citizens can they can walk out and walk in of Ghana without no visa, just American passport or identification or whatever. Then they can carry weapons. Now, listen to this particular detail. They can carry weapons in and out without any check. You cannot, in Ghana, an American citizen carry a weapon. You cannot check them. You cannot check and balance them. According to information, they are exempted from paying any taxes. And listen to this, family. American aircraft and vehicles are exempted from any inspection by Ghanaian authorities. American aircraft and vehicles, they are exempted from any inspection by Ghanaian authorities. Let us sink in. No inspection, no vetting. No Ghanaian control. And when you don't have control, you don't have sovereignty. So, the agreement does not call it a base. It does not need to call it a base, actually. It's an open door to a foreign military intervention. And the Ghanaian government cannot see inside it. And here's the part that cuts deepest. Because back in 2018, this is why we are holding President Mahama accountable. Mahama's own party, the NDC, promised that when it comes to power, it will suspend this agreement that was signed by Akufo-Addo. So a lot of people want to come with this narrative that this agreement was by the former administration, that it wasn't, it has nothing to do with Mahama. Listen carefully. When Mahama came to power, his promise was that they were going to suspend this agreement and they will initiate a far-reaching review. They said it publicly. And now the NDC is in power. What has happened to the agreement? Nothing. He has done nothing. No review, no suspension, no withdrawal. The same party that campaigned against the surrender of sovereignty is now presiding over it in silence. That is not Pan-Africanism, family. That is the exact opposite. And now let's talk about the fifth one. I invited a Ghanaian brother. Love you, brother. Official Survivor Media. And he actually stated this. So let me clarify something to you, okay? And this one should alarm every single one of us. In 2025 and 2026, The United States has been reaching into Ghana and making arrests. Yes. 9 Ghanaians were arrested and extradited to the US in 2025. Alone. All right? With Ghanaian nationals handed over to face American justice in American court. Now, I am not here to defend any wrongdoing of anybody. All right? If you do some things, you have to face the consequence and all of that. Everywhere is data hotel. But here is my question, ladies and gentlemen. When does a sovereign country hand its own citizen to a foreign power without a fight, without question, without proper investigation? Where is the outrage about the US authority? Sovereign to those who want to defend. While our own institutions sit back and watch, America walks into Ghana and they pick up any Ghanaian they like. Right? A truly Pan-African leader will be the first to ask questions as to why American law is being enforced in Ghana. But Americans in Ghana, Ghana has no right to do anything with them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is everything that the likes of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the Assimi Goita, and Abdurrahmani Chiani is completely against. And now here is the 6th thing that I want to bring to your attention. And family, this one is about people, not just paper. On the 10th and 11th of September 2025, President Dramani Mahama announced that Ghana has agreed to accept West African, nationals deported from the United States. And he did it under a deal he connected to the ECOWAS visa-free arrangements. And I will tell you some part of this deal too. 14 deportees have already arrived in Ghana. Around 40 more are on their way. Now, according to information, some other nationals are also in the discussion, not of African origin. So don't let anybody fool you. They are already in discussion for that talk. And I want you to hear Ghana's defense, okay? Because they told us this was humanitarian. That was the defense of Mahama. They told us that this was Pan-African. They said taking in our brothers and sisters is fine. But here is my question. If it is purely brotherhood, why is Ghana acting as a collection point, all right, for Western deportation machine? Since it's not only going to be just African people, there are discussions. Whatever outcome they come out with on that negotiation table, they won't involve you and I. They will never speak about it. So why is a sovereign African leader volunteering his country as a landing pad for US immigration system? The same that was rejected by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. They filed a lawsuit in 2025 to try to void this deal. And the question, ladies and gentlemen, who really benefits? All right? Ghana has no clean answer. It seems as though Ghana has become the Western convenience gateway. And in one direction, our people are taken out for American justice. In other direction, deportees are brought into Ghana for whatever reason. On America's term, and America is still having a discussion with them. They have to follow the play tune of America as far as that discussion is concerned. There are some things that those people will agree, they will just not have to tell you. They call it politics. And a truly Pan-African leader would be negotiating the dignity of Ghanaians, not acting as a delivery service. So if we are to talk about dignity, this same leader is not defending the dignity of his people. America can come in and pick any Ghanaian and fly off. Is that what sovereignty and dignity is? So when you look at the Kuru Kamfuga shelter, you look at everything. Ladies and gentlemen, President Dramani Mahama has not represented at all. And this brings me to the 7th, and perhaps the most telling information of today. He walked into the African Union and, he walked into, the AFCTFA, he talked about financial sovereignty. He gave beautiful speeches in Davos and the United Nations. He actually walked the walk and, at home. And the problem with Mahama administration is the gap between rhetoric and reality. He speaks about African sovereignty. Yes, he talks about it very well. He speaks about reparation for colonial oppression in the United Nations and all of that. I give him that. It was a very good speech. But, whenever he turns around and signs a defense partnership with the European Union, cuts with the French military. The French military are currently present in the territorial waters of Ghana. Not that he called for the assistance of the French again to come and assist Ghana in fighting against galamsey, illegal mining of gold. What is the outcome? Nobody knows. So it's a long story. So it keeps the door open to the US for agreement, even if the sovereignty of Ghana is not respected, even by an inch. When people jump into your country and pick your own citizen, and the consequence will not be based on what your country decides and all that. If you see the way the West have been using Ghana, it's very, very sad. Remember a time where some mysterious human being just popped out of Ghana. They said a Russian using Ghanaians and all of that. My thinking is that Ghanaian citizens are being manipulated and being used as political, pawns for the drama and shenanigans of the West. I'm telling you, only God knows how deep the CIA network runs in Ghana as we speak. My opinion is a dangerous place right now. You can look at all those things that we are saying and you can think, oh man, it happens and all of that. This is by a long shot, a president that does not represent Africa in the right way at all. Your language, I don't even know how to speak Ghanaian language. All right? I don't know how to speak Ghanaian language. I don't understand their indigenous language. Everybody comes out competing. Who speaks English better? Now they want to learn Chinese and Arabic. Ghana, Arabic. Man, you see, you will always be surprised by the moves of some of these entities that people call leaders. And now here's the thing that frustrates me the most. Ladies and gentlemen, the AES country, they are not perfect. Yes, they have their own struggles. But they made a choice. They chose sovereignty. They chose to rebuild their own security on their own terms, to reject the transactional politics of the West, to build their own currency ambition and their own alliance. And here is Ghana, the so-called Black Star of Africa, the birthplace of Kwame Nkrumah, the great Kwame Nkrumah, in fact, the man who literally wrote a book on African liberation, drifting in the opposite direction. That is not just counterproductive, family. That is a betrayal of the founding vision of Kwame Nkrumah and the Kuru Kanfu Gashata, ladies and gentlemen. So let me ask you again, what will Kwame Nkrumah say if he sees his own Ghana today signing military pact with the European Union? Same colonizers of Africa, genocidal colonizers, not just ordinary colonizers. You see, keeping an open door for US inspection-free intervention, handing his own citizen to American justice, and serving as the Western deportation gateway. Why all of this is happening? Pushing our own language aside for Arabic and Chinese. Ladies and gentlemen, what will you say about this leader who claims to be a Pan-Africanist entity but cannot hold the line on sovereignty? That's the big question that a lot of people need to answer. And I think we all know the answer, And that is why I say, with all due respect, that on the evidence we have seen, President John Dramani Mahama is falling and is failing and is regressive when it comes to the Pan-African tests. He has not passed, not by a long shot. Now, I'm not here to tell you to vote for. I'm not here to campaign. This is not my job. My job is to tell you the truth as the information comes in, and let you be the judge, beautiful people. But I think it is important, all right, that we hold our leaders accountable, no matter how sweet their speech sounds to the ear. Because if we do not call it out now, ladies and gentlemen, we end up one day and wonder how Ghana, the flagship of African independence, the so-called non-aligned country, quietly becomes the last domino fall back into the hands, all right? The domino that fell back into the hands of the Western hegemon. It will be so shocking, given the history and the mental wherewithal of the Ghanaians. Very intelligent people. But unfortunately, it happens that great countries in Africa, always fall into the hands of neo-colonialists like this. Akufo-Addo was very, very outspoken, very belligerent in my own opinion, very opposed to African sovereignty, very, very counterproductive to African-owned development. But you see, Dramani Mahama, to me, is even a more dangerous entity. In my opinion, this is, there are different type of people. There are the ones that will stand and they will tell you to your face, I don't like you. And then that's okay. But this is somebody that is very, in my opinion, from everything I've seen, is snake-like. And it is not like he's snake-like. I don't know if you've listened to African politicians. They don't call it you being deceitful or being counterproductive or being snake-like. They call it politics. Some people will tell you that's why politics is a dirty game. So at the end of the day, what Ghana's president is doing, to him, is not counterproductive, even though it is. To him, he is playing politics. It doesn't only happen in Ghana, it happens in Nigeria. It happens in almost all the ECOWAS states. So with regards to this topic, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hear your opinion. The EU Defense Partnership, the agreement with the US base, the failed promise of John Dramani Mahama that he would suspend whatever agreement they had with the previous administration. Any American can enter Ghanaian soil, regardless of who he is, without visa or anything, just an American passport. And they cannot be checked. They cannot be searched or checked. I mean, I've never ever heard anything like this in my life. They cannot be checked. They just have to carry the American symbol. So if they are carrying weapons to the north, they cannot be checked in Ghana. So tell me what is Pan-African about this so-called leader. Is it the American citizens being handed over to American courts that we want to talk about? Is it the deportation that is in the discussion of foreign nationals that are not even African to Ghana? And they will hold the Ghanaian authorities accountable for those people. Where is Africa going, ladies and gentlemen? A lot of people are asking questions, and I want you to know that I am with all of you. I've seen your questions, and to be honest with you, I've done my research. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ghana of today is by a long shot different from the Ghana of the Kwame Nkrumah and the founding fathers. The Ghana of today is far away from the Kurukan Fugashata. It's disappointing, It's disgraceful. It's embarrassing that a country like Ghana in West Africa, you see so much propaganda about the administration that is currently here, but they don't tell you about the counterproductive deals they are signing with the European Union and with the rest. Well, it's at this point that I want to wish you all farewell. If you enjoyed the video, and if you think I've given you anything of value, you can kindly do well to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Now, what I'm saying in short is that, yeah, we have to be careful with some of these leaders. Some leaders are in Africa, we know they are counterproductive. We know they are imperialist lucky. The most dangerous one is Ghana. President Dramani Mahama is that guy that you are praising and is dancing. You see, this thing that the most painful aspect of the whole thing to me is that this guy is literally playing game with Africans. That to him, that's what he's doing. That's what I see. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy called Sign 72 and Rage signing out. Enough said. But before I go, thank you for coming. And God bless you.